Hey everybody, Todd here, and welcome to a Wellness Talks live broadcast edition. Today, just given the volume of couples that I've seen in and out of my office space, I decided that I would put something together just for them, just for other couples out there that might be struggling a little bit, especially right now with COVID and just the uncertainties that goes with COVID and all the different situations. Kids are home, kids are not home, I'm at work, I'm not at work, and the impact that actually has on couples. So today I'm going to be going through three of my favorite communication couples tools that I use. So it's couples communications strategies. So I'm just going to jump into there. But before I go further, I just wanted to thank everybody on Patreon for giving me a couple of questions ahead of time to play around with. I'll make sure that I get to those as well. But I am going to go through a couple communication breakdown component. I'm going to be looking at a tool called Right Brain to Right Brain to help to deal with how to speak more empathetically and listen more empathetically. And then I will scroll into a favorite that I use all the time, both with individuals and with couples, which is the S.T.O.P or the STOP technique. First section should take about 15 minutes. The second session, I'll just leave it open for the amount of questions I get in today. Of course, answering the ones I got from Patreon. And of course, if you're not able to be here today, I will make sure that I upload this later on as a video, and then I'll cut some of these sections into smaller pieces so you don't have to watch the whole thing. So with that being said, let me go ahead and move into one of the big components that I typically start off with when I'm working with a couple, is just getting them to denote or understand the different aspects of what causes a breakdown in communication. So there are three different aspects that contribute to a communication breakdown. So these aspects are typically what show up. You're not even aware that they're there. And if we can learn how to objectify, learn that these components are there and they're just naturally occurring, just based upon how we are as human beings, these three aspects will help us to, oh, am I doing this? Or after the fact, you can even review, oh, geez, I guess this thing showed up for me and it just activated my automatic responses, which of course leads into the loop, the behavior loops, the types of situations, the outcomes which constantly happen and don't give you the results that you want. So if we can become aware of these aspects, we can identify them, hopefully, in the middle of it. But even if we just identify it afterwards, it increases the likelihood that we'll be able to catch it in the next one of these breakdowns that we have. So the first component is actually called an unfulfilled expectation. And these are pretty common sense components. Unfulfilled expectations, I mean what I say when I say this here, is that there was something that you expected was going to occur that didn't. And perhaps this was something to the effect of you thought that the person was going to do the laundry, or you thought the other person was going to show up on time, or you thought that they understood the ins and outs of tax season, which is coming up. And when you got to the moment, when you got to that section, you realized they didn't. And there's a physical response to this. There's a charge to this. There's something that just gets you riled up. The unfulfilled expectation. This is one of the most important components to watch for. And this not only happens in couples, it happens at work, it happens with school, it happens with friends. So if you can learn how to do it here in the laboratory, so to speak, of a relationship inside of this couple, you'll benefit from it here, but you should benefit from it elsewhere in your life as well. Now, the second one is an undelivered communication. There's something that you wanted to say. There's something that you thought you said. There's some kind of message that you wish that you could put out there, but you don't. Whether you're afraid of, if I say this, if I bring this up, if I try to make this part of the conversation, it's just going to lead to X, Y, and Z. Like your mind jumps out there and says, if I say that, I know I'm going to cause the situation. And we got to remember, maybe, but thoughts aren't facts. So yes, you may have a history of it, but your thoughts actually, you're predicting, and it could be a stronger prediction, but ultimately an undelivered communication is definitely a place where things can come up short. And of course, an undelivered communication can lead to an unfulfilled expectation and can lead into this next component, which is basically a blocked intention. Your intention was to have a nice evening. Your intention was to surprise the other person. Your intention was to be able to just lay back, chill out, and not have to deal with. Your intention was to come home from work and just be able to just gather your energy after a long day, a bunch of challenges. So you can see how all three of these different aspects, the undelivered communication, the blocked intention, and the unfulfilled expectation, all three of these things show up inside of a breakdown. So here's the cool thing you can actually do with this. If you or your partner notices this and you're aware of this concept, you can actually say, I think we might be having a breakdown. Like, you'll notice that you're just about to launch into that usual pattern of, I'm going to do they said A, I do B, they do C, I do D. And this pattern, this cycle, is the thing which is causing a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenges in your relationship. If one of you, though, can recognize, oh, I expected this, or I didn't disclose that, or there was something I wanted to say and I didn't say and I held on to it till now, or God, all I really wanted was like 20 minutes of peace and quiet because I just got home from school or work or wherever it was. So in the middle of all this, you can say, I think we might be having a breakdown. So this is a good tool, and it's a skill. So you're going to have to practice it. So just remember these key points. You're looking for these three aspects, these three components. And I would like for you to go ahead and just give it a shot. And remember, you can, even after you've had one of those challenging moments and it didn't go how you wanted it, it went sideways, just come back to this on your own and go, the three aspects, which one showed up? And one of them probably shows up stronger than the other two. The more we can train ourselves to do this, the more likely we are the next time to actually have to notice it, be able to declare a breakdown, be able to do a few of the other steps that I'm about to show you, such as a stop technique or just a pause technique, something that gives you a little bit of time. Oh, and then finally, promise if you do break away, promise that you come back in 5 and 10 or 20 minutes. So that's a little bit about these three elements, the communication breakdown. And I hope that was of use to you. Now, the second one that I often use with couples in session is trying to get out in front of that fix-it mentality. So it's not unusual for somebody to come home, they've had a long day, and they go, oh God, blah, 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 blah happened today. This is happening and it just made me so upset, or it's getting me down. And the person who's listening automatically jumps into fix-it mode. And there's a lot of reasons why we do this. Obviously, the person matters to us, and so we want to help them solve the issue. That's kind of on the surface. That's the obvious reason for trying to assist, trying to fix. Also, underneath this, a little bit harder to see, is that when somebody that matters to us is having a difficult moment, we feel it too. It hurts us too. Not to the same extent, but we don't want to necessarily have to. It hurts. It relates. We are connected in that way. 70% of our communication is body language. So you can just read it coming off of that other person and you feel it. And so what do you try to do? Well, you don't like it. Just at a subconscious level, we don't like it. And so we try to escape from it, avoid it, or control it. And we often go to the toolbox and we say, let's try to fix this. That doesn't usually land very well. So any suggestion you may come up with, they probably thought of already. And in a way, it's kind of patronizing, or they may take it that way. Like, you didn't think that I didn't think of these solutions already. And it's not even what they were really looking for. What they're really looking for is, I feel this way. Is this okay that I feel this way? So the right brain to right brain communication component, and this is actually drawing from a gentleman named Daniel Siegel. He has a whole thing called Mindsight, fantastic book, just to give you a better understanding of how the neurology, how the brain actually works. And I liked it. He applied it a lot with teaching children how to become more balanced, how to become more psychologically flexible. But I've actually taken it and I use it quite a bit with just inside of couples therapy, inside of couples counseling, to help them learn how to communicate better. So right brain to right brain is basically just taking a moment to listen, hear, be present in this moment. You might have to catch yourself going, oh, it's too bad she feels this way. But put yourself in the other person's shoes and just notice, take a guess as to what the other person's emotional experience is currently like and describe it to them. So I come home from work, it's been a long day, I've had a lot of patients, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, there was something that happened with an insurance company or in billing or who knows. And instead of my wife saying, well, did you try to do this? Did you try to do that? Which is going to fall a little bit short. My wife goes, it sounds like that was a really frustrating day for you. She's basically describing my experience. And you can put yourself in their shoes. And if I was them and I was experiencing that myself, what would be my emotional experience, my mental state right now? And just simply describe that. Right brain, emotional response to the right brain, emotional placement, emotional experience, right brain to right brain. It's not really happening necessarily in your right brain, but it's a good tool. It's a good way to actually remember this right brain to right brain communication technique or style. It's a skill just the same, and it takes practice. So don't always do it just when things are not going well, but wow, that's, somebody comes in and they're excited. Hey, I got an A, I did this, I got that. That's fantastic. You must feel pretty good. Oh, wow, I would be excited if I was you too. So it's just coming up with phrases that describe what's happening in this present moment with this person present and you present. You're just describing, oh, seems like this is the emotional state. When it comes to COVID, I find myself doing this often. People will complain about this, it's uncertain, and that's uncertain, and this is uncertain. And I'll be like, yeah, it's really confusing, doesn't it? I find myself, I can relate to that. I find myself just going, oh yeah, this sucks. And that's sometimes all that's necessary. And when you're done doing that, stop talking. You don't have to fix it. You feel compelled to fix it. Our culture says we should try to fix it, try to help others. But one of the best things we can do in a moment like that is just provide a space. If they ask for help, that's a different story. So that's the right brain to right brain technique. Now, this third and final one of the main techniques that I'm often using with couples is actually called the S.T.O.P technique. It's a fantastic thing to do. If you can recognize that you're having a breakdown, you can also start to train yourself to just notice, I think if we proceed forward right now, we should probably just stop. This isn't going to go anywhere good. We're just going to get caught in that loop where you do this and I say that, and then I say this and you do that, and we just get stuck in this big loop. And so what we want to do is just remember this acronym in that moment. And what we're going to do is just simply stop and step back and take a break, observe and proceed. So this S stands for stepping back or sitting back or just slowing everything down, just pushing away. And then the T is that we just want to take a moment. We want to take a few breaths. We want to pause, slow it down. The mind is just going to come at you with all those automatic, this is how I should respond. I'm sure you could give me tons of examples, but that's just how this particular component works. We need to slow it down. We need to just pull back and take a few breaths. So that's part 2. So that the T is for just taking a moment. The next part is observing. And this is where mindfulness skills help quite a bit. So if you don't know much about that, you should check out my channel. I got a whole section, Monday Morning Mindfulness. It will teach you all about how to do mindfulness techniques to bring it into this moment. And really, if you think about it, I'm saying the way I'm using mindfulness is situational awareness. So the O, observe what's happening right now. Observe what's happening externally. This is what the other person is saying. This is the current environment that we're in. And internally, what's showing up for you? What are your physical sensations? Actually, physical sensations, tightness in your stomach, heaviness in your chest. Are you clenching your jaw? Are you hot? Did you just go flushed? Notice what's happening physically, and notice the mental component, the thought, the memory that shows up almost simultaneous with that. Observe what's happening right now. So you're watching what's happening with your partner, you're watching what's happening in the environment, and you're watching what's happening right now. This gives you a lot of present moment information, and it's still slowing down the whole process, just giving you a place to get off the loop, to get off that this isn't going to go anywhere loop. And then finally, the P. The P is to proceed or to pivot towards that which matters. So in this moment right now, I came home from work. I talk about what's going wrong. My wife tries to give me something to fix it. I notice what comes up for me. She's noticing what comes up for her. We're able to pause. We're both saying, hey, we have a breakdown, or at least we say, can we just shoulder this? Can we stop for a second and come back in like 20 minutes? I'd love to tell you about it, but I just need to take a couple breaths and just reflect, observe on what's going on right now, and move towards peace, move towards what matters in that moment, move towards those personal values. Offer that. Maybe your personal value is kindness. Maybe your personal value is growth. Maybe your personal value is just belonging and wanting to relate and connect. It's compassion. It's empathy. What do I need to do now? Is telling this person how to fix it being kind? Is telling this person how to fix it compassionate, empathetic, present, relational? Just take a look at that. And if you don't know what your personal values are, it's definitely something worth checking out. Spending a little bit of time, putting a little bit of effort, and just drilling down into and finding out what those values are. And I've got a whole series of different videos which address just that, including a new worksheet that's out there as well to help you in these moments when you're able to get some space from what's going on right now and all the different memories and the sensations. Once we've got it out in front of us, we can pivot towards the thing that actually matters and move in that direction. This tool all by itself is usually a tool that I'll give couples right at the beginning when I first start to meet with them. And 75–80% of the time, they'll come back and be like, my God, that was an incredible technique. It's an incredible skill. It's stopped half of the problems that we were having. So it's absolutely worth getting into, paying attention to, checking on. Again, it is a skill. And you're not going to remember this the first couple times you're in that heated argument or you're in that difficult challenge. But what I recommend you do is that afterwards, go sit down somewhere and do this whole technique. Anyways, sit back, take a bunch of breaths, especially if it was a pretty heated argument. You're going to need some moment to just allow the autonomic nervous system, that fight, flight, or freeze, to just work its way out of your system. Observe what happened, and then finally take a look at, what did I do? How did I respond? I had a sensation. I had a thought that went with it. This is what I did. This is that thing that always gets me into trouble. Oh, it didn't move towards what I would like to see in our relationship in the long run, in the long term. Short term, I get to get away from it. I got to avoid it. I got to escape from it. But they're not as satisfying as obviously building on a larger issue, a larger sense, or a larger personal value. So that is the STOP technique. So we've got these three techniques that can help you to move through a lot of difficult moments. These are the tools that I use with a lot of with my couples. Of course, I can sit there in session with them and actually take their experience and really help them see how this tool applies. So obviously this isn't therapy. This isn't going to give you quite the same thing, but I have a suspicion if you go out and you give it a shot and just try it, think of it as an experiment. I mean, what do you have to lose? A better communication pattern in the future? So these are the couples communication strategies that I really wanted to get out there for you. I am going to break these down into 3 smaller pieces, but I'd also like then to just go ahead and get into some of the questions from some of my supporters on Patreon and any other questions that I may have received. And I'll check my email here in a second to see if I'm getting anything from anybody else. Oh, I am getting something. All right. So question, let's just go in and jump into the questions. Let me check my comments real quick. And let's take a quick look at chats. And I've got that there. All right, so question and answer segment here on Wellness Talks. And we're dealing with, of course, couples communication strategies. And Joseph asks, how do I let go of self-judgment? And I think what he meant by, in his initial component, was I tend to beat myself up after. So there's an issue, there's a challenge, something transpires, and you walk away from this going, I didn't respond in alignment with what I wanted to see happen. And it didn't turn out how I was hoping. Why does that always happen? Why do I always do that? And then you start to beat yourself up. So if you just notice that, well, this is over with, this is done. Here is an opportunity. We have a new opportunity right now. We have new data. I tried that strategy, which I've tried multiple times before, and it didn't work. So first thing we do is we notice that we do have a typical sense, a typical automatic response to be critical. We want that to a certain degree. It's how we learn. We go and we do something, we don't do it quite as well as we want. We come back and we're more critical of that, and we use that to hopefully do something better in the future. But it doesn't change the fact that there's a sense, a feeling, a sensation, physical sensation that hurts. And we wish that that would go away. And that mind goes, if you wouldn't talk to this person, and then they say, well, you could have done this better, or your mind gives you all kinds of other solutions, and it just harps on you. And the wild thing is, you couldn't win. If it's a challenging situation, your mind's always going to find a different way that you could have done this, that you could have presented this. So the greatest way to get away from the self-judgment is to notice that judgment, notice that series of thoughts, and give it a label. Call it the critical mind, the skeptical mind. You could call it the punisher, or you could just give it a name like Joe or Fred or Mary, whatever you want. You can think of somebody that kind of would represent that for you. You can be like, oh, geez, that critical Joe, here he is again. He's just showing back up. Give it a name. Give yourself some distance. This is a really good way to pull away from and not deal as much with the self-judgment. The other component is just recognizing that it's a learning situation. We are human beings. We don't know it all. And no matter what we do, we're going to find ourselves in these situations where we open our mouths and another person takes offense. We run that risk, right? Every time you open your mouth, we run the risk of upsetting somebody else. And there's no way we could possibly prepare for all of that. But what we can do is just notice this is what's come up. We can use the stop technique. We can use a pause in this moment. We can step back and just notice that there are some elements of a breakdown, and we can proceed forward with that. In other words, the short answer for all this is that we just notice the thought, the criticism, how we're beating ourselves up, and hold it lightly. Because is getting pulled into that thought continuously for an extended period of time useful? Or are you wasting energy here that you could be moving towards something else in your life that matters now? So great question, Joseph. Thanks for that. So the next question it's coming from Amy, and Amy asks, how do I communicate my feelings without blaming? So we talked about stop routine in a moment ago, and we've looked at other components. There's other techniques that I have. We want to go ahead and just, again, notice what's currently happening. That need to blame. So somebody says something and I feel an emotional charge. I feel physical response to that, and a thought, oh, here he goes saying that again, or oh, here she goes again. We're going to go in. And there's just this automatic response. First thing we got to do is we got to really pay attention to that. It's that situational awareness, that mindful moment, being present here. Oh, this just happened. And slowing the conversation, the interaction down. And noticing what you were just about to do. And it's not unusual to jump into, when you say stuff like that, it really makes me angry. Or, when, you do something like that, it really upsets me, or it catches me off guard. And we're pushing over and we're saying you. So I know that there's a bunch of stuff out there, and we can go ahead and we can use those I statements. But there's a problem with those I statements because sometimes some people are really clever and they'll be like, I don't like it when you do this. You're not quite using it how it would be most useful or effective in the long run. What you want to do in that moment is first, again, check in with yourself, observe what's going on, take a couple breaths, and try to frame what you're observing happening now. I've noticed that statements like that, they show up. They're hitting me in this kind of a way. It's landing wrong. It's coming in sideways, and I'm not sure what that's all about. And you don't even have to know where you're going to go. All you're doing is just describing your experience right now in this moment, not pushing it off on that other person. Just, this is my reaction to what just happened, and see what happens. Just be present. So one of the best ways to then deal with and communicate your feelings without blaming is just being present to what those actually are. And there's a lot of other things that can be underneath that as well. For instance, the need to be right. So it shows up as a feeling, but what it really is that you have a rule, you have a belief that is pretty rigid, and whatever's just transpired, whatever's the other person is saying doesn't match with that rule. And so you're trying to get that person to see your point of view. Instead, just put the point of view out in front of them. Because then we're not saying that you're not doing this. You're just simply saying, I have this thing where this shows up and I feel this way. And what's happening now seems to be that's what's happening. Is that what's happening? And give them a moment to just, you're disarming the whole situation. You're allowing them to actually approach it with curiosity, like a scientist, and go, oh, hey, look at this. It opens up the door for much, I wouldn't say easier, but more neutral conversation. So this would be probably one of the better ways to think about how to communicate your feelings without blaming. So thank you so much, Amy, for throwing that out there. That was a good question, just the same. And then I had the final one. This is also coming from Christina. This was actually just an email from somebody, and they came down to, how can I really listen to my partner when I'm triggered? And it's very similar to what we were just talking about. So you're in the middle of a conversation, something transpires, and boom, you're jolted into this, and you have that automatic response. So in a way, this question's kind of been answered here today already. But I'll back up again because this is a slightly different angle. So we're using the term triggered, and that gets just bantered about all the time. And what it is that there's that unconscious rule, that belief. This is how something should unfold. There's the expectation. There's a communication that hasn't been delivered. And all of a sudden, that alert system in you just kicks into, it just turns on. Fight, flight, freeze. Autonomic nervous system. It does also, by the way, take 5, 10 to 20 minutes for those chemicals, cortisol, to just run its course. So until then, you're not really up here. You're just in reactionary mode. So if that's what you mean by triggered, then yeah, that's what's going on. That's the physiological component. So how we can do that then is just notice that this is what's going on. And again, just let it sit there lightly. So a good example is, if I was to utilize this book, and this is, somebody says something and all of a sudden this memory and sensations come up, boom, and this is what it feels like. No matter where I look, there it is. There's what's going on in front of us. But if I could take a moment, step back, take a breath, observe, so using that stop technique again, I can objectify it, see it out in front of me. Now, I don't want to be completely fused to it because that's not going to give me the results that I'm wanting. I don't want to push back against it and try to make it go away because, well, have you ever tried to make a thought go away? Even a thought that's implied. Like, for instance, don't think about the number that comes after 1 and before 3. Just don't think about it. It's not really easy to do. Your mind's probably already thinking about it. And that would be kind of like pushing it, trying to make that notion go away. What we can do, though, is we can go, oh, are you saying two? Is this what you mean, two? And we put it out there. We objectify it. We take it out of this abstract realm and we make it out here so it's something we can actually see. This is actually why journaling and writing things down works, because we take all this abstract noise and we put it onto a sheet of paper or a journal in front of us. We want to move into that when we're triggered, notice it, put it out in front. And then what we can do is, once we've got it all identified, I can just sit it here on my lap. The book is actually sitting on my lap. The book representing whatever thoughts, responses are coming up, my triggered. I like to say the word activated. So, this activates a certain system in my body, in my mind, in my brain. And I notice all of that's happening. And I can even just sit here with you holding this. I'm aware it's there, but this is what's more important. Talking to you about these things, working through and helping to define a situation, to answer a question, to work on whatever it is you're working on. It doesn't have to be here. It doesn't have to be a forcing it. And of course, a lot of people would be like, well, why don't you just toss it over there? Well, that goes back to the whole, don't think of a number between, 1. Don't think about the number that comes after 1 and before 3. If I toss it off to the side, I still know it's there. It's still going to just eat at me. And then once the situation's done, I'm going to have to deal with that sooner or later. So that fourth option is just to hold on to it, just to keep it right here. So those are the 3 questions that I was able to get ahead of time. I'm going to just double check here real quick. So Jim writes, how do you work to learn to use stop right at the moment when you're in the heat of the argument? So yes, when it comes to any of these techniques, stop technique, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which I teach, or just the slowing things down, 3 elements of an upset, you're not. At first, you're just not going to do it because there are certain components. This is an automatic system. This is a very old behavior, probably really old. If we go back and look at it, maybe you developed this response when you were 5 or 10 or 15, which is kind of a strange thing if you think about it, because that means you're actually using a rule that you created then, now, at this age, at this time. Imagine trying to wear that t-shirt that you loved from when you were in the 2nd grade. Now, it wouldn't fit. It would constrict everything. So, but how we learn to stop, how we learn to use these techniques is that once it's done, we set aside time to practice. We pull out a sheet of paper, we write down what was happening, we write down what I did, we write down what I was experiencing, and we look at those things. Actually, you could just think of it as A, B, C, so antecedent, behavior, consequence. We write that down the sheet. What was the scene? What was the behavior? What happened? What did I feel? What did I experience? And then what was the outcome? And you'll start to see these things in place. And you can also just sit there with the stop technique and just go, sit back, take a breath, observe what's happening right now. You might start thinking, oh, right now, I'm thinking about how I could have said something different. I'm thinking how I could have reacted differently. And I'm beating myself up. So this goes back to Joseph's question of beating yourself up. Notice that that's actually what you're doing right now. You're beating yourself up. You're actually practicing the stop technique, not in that situation, but you're practicing it right now in this present moment. And it's a skill. So we just keep practicing it. And the more that we can practice this, the more likely that we're going to catch ourselves in the middle of an argument. Now, to add on top of that, though, is, sorry, I just got distracted. I just saw there was another post. But to add to the top of this is that when we practice this, and we can add mindfulness, we can practice mindfulness, because mindfulness is really all about, again, that situational awareness, taking some time to be present and notice everything that's happening. Watch thoughts as they occur, watch sensations, things that I can hear, things that I can see. You're moving from that thinking mind, that critical mind, over to the observing mind, or the observing aspect of yourself and the thinking aspect of yourself. I mean, you don't really have multiple minds in there, but we do have different processes, different components that are going on. Self as context, the observing mind, is always available as well. And that's just simply being there without judgment and just noticing what's going on. It's kind of like a sense of wonderment too when you're there. And everybody, when they practice this, reports back to me that they feel calmer, that they feel that they have some distance from it, and it's just nowhere near as intense. So I got another comment that came in. It's from James. So thanks, James. We got Jim and we got James. We got a whole bunch of the J's coming up today. So antecedent behavior consequence. Glad you like that, because yes, that's actually probably a whole other tool that I could talk about when it comes to being more reflective. And in a nutshell, real quick for you, James, is that you write down A, B, and C, and in the A, which is the antecedent, you just write down what happened. Like, what was the scene? Where it's like a movie. What's the scene? And then these two people show up, and then this is what transpires. B is how did you transpire? What actually was going on at that time? How did it affect you? How could you see it was affecting them? And remember, you're projecting, you're thinking this is how they see it. So just keep that in mind as well. And then C, based upon what the two of you did or what you just did, what was the outcome? What was the consequence? And then you can take that one step further, and we'll use the P from that stop technique. We'll look at the values. Okay, so next time I see this, I just need to have like a little red flag that goes up. I'm going to practice writing this down, because I know that if I write this down, that I'm going to become better at this in the future. I can pivot towards this. And then the next time I find myself in that scene, that antecedent shows up, and my behavior, that response to whatever happening inside of here, whatever happening out there, I can pause that. And I can remember in that moment, in the long run, the thing that matters here the most between the two of us is peace, is connection, is intimacy, is communication, is partnership, is kindness, is joy. And even though I might be right, what can I do right now to move in that direction? Because I'm recognizing if we're both heated, even if I'm right, it doesn't actually matter, because the other person's not necessarily going to hear it. Or I can put it out there, have my peace, and let it go. And just move towards that. What do I need to do now? What do we need to do now to move in that direction? So thank you guys so much for the extra components or the extra questions. Just want to check my Patreon group chat real quick, make sure I'm not missing something else. Let's see. And if you have questions, of course, after the fact, you can always just toss them into the comment section below. You can reach out to me on my website, which is you can go to either toddschmenk.com or aquatherapies.com. You can send me a message that way. And of course, if you're on Patreon and I don't see any other questions coming in from all of them, I get a bunch of thumbs up. So thank you guys for at least that. And thank you for supporting me with this today. And I hope that all of this was useful to you. I hope that you can take these tools and use them here and then be able to generalize them and use them in other areas of your life. That's really what this is all about. And I look forward to doing this again with all of you in the future. And until the next time, I wish you all well.